And the biggest lesson I've learned from humble inquiry and humble leadership is that until we build a relationship with those people who are going to have to implement the improvement, and if that doesn't become a personalized relationship, I don't think we can count on them to cheer our beautiful improvement design just because we thought it was great.
Hi, everybody. I'm Elizabeth Swan.
And I'm Tracy O'Rourke.
And we are from GoingSixSigma.com, and you're listening to the Just in Time Cafe podcast, where we bring you fabulous apps, polls, news, books, and people so you can build your problem-solving muscles.
Well, I don't know about you, Elizabeth. I'm done celebrating Thanksgiving, but I'm still feeling very thankful.
I'm with you. November and December feel kind of like these reflective times.
Absolutely. It must be the end of the year, and we all know the new year is coming.
Yeah, great positive role models. For the rest of us, I am psyched to get into this.
All right, let's go to the private dining room. So, Elizabeth, tell us what we're going to be thankful for today on the menu.
Happy to do that. For those of you in the U.S. who are a little tired of turkey stuffing and cranberry sauce, you'll appreciate the all-new menu for you here at the cafe. Today's special is a rare treat. Tracy got to interview organizational scholar Edgar Schein and his son Peter, who's a former Silicon Valley executive. They discuss their book, Humble Leadership, and you do not want to miss this interview. For the appetizer, we'll discuss the first in a series of apps and software to create charts and assess your data, something essential to process improvement efforts. And for our In the News segment, we'll discuss how GoingSixSigma.com ended up in the news. For the printed page, we'll provide our own take on Edgar and Peter Schein's new book, Humble Leadership. This is a great episode, and we are very happy to have you join us.
Remember to stay tuned for this month's coupon code in order to get a discount on GoingSixSigma.com's online training.
Let's get to the appetizer.
Okay, Elizabeth, I cannot believe it's taken us this long to talk about any stats packages on our podcast.
What is wrong with us? This segment is more focused on apps, and I think we always thought of those as, little software helper things, the stuff on your iPhone and your Androids, but these are full-fledged software, but there's no reason we have to nitpick on this one because this is important. So we're going to do a series of reviews on stats packages, and we're going to discuss the different tools out there. You can use things to create charts, to create graphs, to run your hypothesis tests. So we're going to start with Excel and it's the data workhorse for a lot of people, and it's been around since 1985. It was interesting to reflect on. So it's over 30 years old. So we're going to start there. This comes with Microsoft Office. And like everyone else, they've moved to a subscription service, so it costs around $70 a year to get the whole Office package. Google has created an Excel-like offering, which is Google Sheets, which is free online spreadsheet software. I just looked at a little bit, and I could only get a bar chart, but I'll come back to that one at some point. So back to Excel. There's lots of options for basic charts. You got line charts, bar charts, histograms, scatter plots, box and whisker or box plots, and a rudimentary Pareto, which is under histograms, which I just kind of discovered, Tracy. Did you know that one was there?
Yeah, I did. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, you're ahead of me. So the other thing you have to do with Excel is you have to add on Analysis Tool Pack. That gives you more advanced tools. It doesn't come readily installed, but it's there for you to install. Where I think Excel falls down is control charts. They are kind of considered the Cadillac of line charts or run charts, and they're completely missing. So people create workarounds. They create templates that help you create your own control charts, but it would be great if Excel would get on that bandwagon.
Yes.
Yeah, and with the Analysis Tool Pack, you get the hypothesis test, things like ANOVA and F-tests and T-tests and chi-square, and correlation and regression. So once you have the Analysis Tool Pack, you can just click on the Data Analysis menu, and then you'll see the list of hypothesis tests. It even has a random number generator. Did you know that, Tracy?
I did not.
Okay, so now I told you something new. So net result, there's no extra charge here. We'll talk about sort of other things that add on to Excel in the future, but it has most of the charts we use. It's missing control charts, but there are workarounds for that.
Very nice. And it seems like Excel, people are so versed in Excel, and it does provide enough charting power for most folks, especially dabbling in process improvement if it's not your full-time job. And I find even at UCSD, when we did cover statistical tools and software, people were still coming to the table with Excel charts and graphs because that's what people know. So it's easy for them to use. And so it does lack control charts. That's a miss, but the basics are there.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a great point I didn't hit on, which is people have been using this for a while. So when they think about a new stats package and learning new software, that's a learning curve, that's time, that's effort. This doesn't have that because, like you said, most people are comfortable with it. So that's a good point. Okay, that's our first in our series, Excel.
All right, done. I'm Tracy O'Rourke, and you're listening to the Just in Time Cafe podcast. Up next, it's Lean Six Sigma in the news.
Tracy, we found out we're in the news.
I can't believe it. GoLeanSixSigma.com is in the news. GoLeanSixSigma.com and Kush Supply are partnering to make production and distribution of cannabis accessories more efficient. Kushco Holdings, a parent company of Kush Supply Company, put out a press release that appeared in the Bakersfield Californian. Kush Supply Co. is the nation's largest and most respected distributor of packaging, supplies, and accessories to the regulated cannabis and CBD industry. And they selected us, GoLeanSixSigma.com, and our consultants to work with the operations team to support implementing improved processes. So there are teams of people working to create standard work, visual boards, and other forms of visual management in their warehouse and beyond. They have a very strong commitment to process excellence. They are very focused right now, and that will put them in a position to scale and expedite their rapid growth. I believe they're called a hyper-growth company right now.
Yeah.
So our master black belts, Claire DeFrisco and Rian Deploy, are working there diligently with the teams at Kush. Rian is a Lean Six Sigma master black belt and consultant. He got a start in perfume manufacturing in Australia. He has an awesome accent, and perhaps more importantly, over 17 years of leading, teaching, coaching, and facilitating Lean Six Sigma. We're happy to have him on our team. Claire is another awesome Lean Six Sigma consultant. She spent over 20 years helping huge multinational companies reduce costs, drive value, create operational efficiencies, and hit their strategic goals. And she's a lot of fun because that is really important. And they really are a dream team. I'm excited that they're in there. The VP of Operations, Rodrigo de Oliveira, loves them. And he had a nice quote. He said, with GoLeanSixSigma.com, our goal is to solidify a strong process foundation with a focus on sustainable and robust internal capabilities by integrating daily business processes to quickly assess the current scenario, tap into the knowledge of the internal team to do the actual work of creating new, stronger, scalable, and sustainable processes.
That's a nice quote.
We know it's all about leadership, so it's important to point out that they also have the full support of Nick Kovacevic, the CEO of Kushco. As a process improvement consultant, it's exciting to see process improvement applied to a brand new industry with hyper growth. They are growing so fast. They will definitely appreciate process focus.
That was great. I love seeing that press release, and I love what they're doing. It's awesome. I'm Elizabeth Swan, and you're listening to the Just in Time Cafe podcast. In a short while, we'll get to hear Tracy's interview with organizational development legend Edgar Schein and his co-author and son, Peter, as they give us some of their insights on their new book, Humble Leadership. But first, it's the printed page.
So you really enjoyed this book, didn't you, Elizabeth?
Yes, I did. I loved it. I read it on the way to the Results Washington conference. Long flights are great for books. I don't miss the interview, but I want to just take a moment to discuss the book from our perspective. First, you have to appreciate that Edgar Schein is 90 years old, and he is still writing books. He's extensively published, And this is a collaboration with his son, Peter, which is also really nice to see. This is the third in the sort of this Humble series. And we also reviewed Humble Inquiry this year, which is another must read. And this book also touches on this idea of asking instead of telling. It's the spirit of inquiry, but it's about the relationships you form as a leader. And the key that they talk about is these personal relationships with direct reports in order to build trust. And Tracy, it had those interesting levels that he talks about, right?
Yes, the different levels of leadership.
Yeah. So there's the one he focuses on is the level 2, which is openness, which is how you are with your friends and family. But he said what happened in hierarchical and sort of traditional organizations is we impose distance, and he calls those level 1 or transactional relationships. So it's moving away from those.
Yes, because they're less personal.
Yeah. And then he talks about what does that do to the organization? You know, when you have this hierarchy and you have this distance, then people do not feel free to tell you what's happening, right? They don't tell you what's going on. And you can't really afford that because everything is moving at rapid rates of speed. Technology is changing constantly. And you have to be that connected to stay abreast, to stay focused, to make the right decisions. So that was interesting, just feeling like this is a leadership model for the future, right?
Yes. And I mean, I really like what he talks about in the book because, I think a lot of people think, oh, I'm not supposed to have a relationship with people at work, but it really is a relationship. I mean, that makes people feel like they belong. There's so many benefits to it. And I don't think that leaders in the past have really recognized what it does for employee engagement. Who wouldn't want to go to a workplace where, you're cared about and there's a relationship there?
Yeah.
You have to go there every day. You go to work every day. Majority of our time is spent at work and sleeping.
Yeah, that's it. And they can't help us with the sleeping part, but they're definitely helping us with the relationship part. The other thing that struck me is, that title, humble, like, what does that mean? And they were really careful to point out, it doesn't mean you have to be nice all the time. It doesn't mean you have to like everybody. You're not throwing pool parties and having everyone for dinner. It just means you treat people like they're actual human beings. Like, we all have lives outside of work. We are full-fledged people. And it says if you treat people and look at them that way, then you form these bonds of trust, and that opens up communication that is just critical in organizations now. Little things help, like just chatting at the start of meetings to check in with people and not focusing only on high potential employees, treating everyone like they have potential. You need that silo crossing network. You need all people to be talking to each other and have those avenues open.
It reminds me, I'm just going to share this one experience I had. I went and visited a very slick, cool, awesome building in a very cool industry. And the building had just gotten built and it was pretty amazing. And I was walking with a few employees through. I said, wow, this must be a really cool place to come to every day. And someone said to me, an employee said to me, yeah, but there's no soul here.
Mm.
It's a soulless organization. That's what they said. Whoa, that really hit me hard. Like, how'd you like to work for a soulless organization?
And I think, to their point, this isn't just altruistic. It isn't just, it feels better to work in an organization with a soul. It's, you work harder, you make better decisions, people are more productive. So this is about helping companies thrive. And it's a great book. Highly recommend it. It's one of the best I've read this year.
Really? It's one of the best books you've read this year?
Yep.
Because you read a lot of books, Elizabeth. I mean, you read a book every month.
I know. Which reminds me, you can read the whole review, the whole book review, which is really a book report, on our website. Highly recommend that too.
I would recommend it too. You did a great job on that.
Thanks, Tracy.
Okay, it's time to announce the coupon code.
This code is for 20% off any of our Lean Six Sigma training and certification courses. That's white belt, yellow belt, green belt, black belt, and lean training.
If you've joined us at the Just in Time Cafe, just use coupon code 20LATTE. That's 20LATTE during checkout. Make sure to use it soon since the coupon code will expire at the end of December.
Coming up next, it's today's special. Tracy, give us a little preview of your interview with Edgar and Peter Schein.
I've had the pleasure of meeting Ed Schein at a conference before. It was put on by the authors of the Leadership Challenge, Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner. And I really enjoyed seeing him, listening to him speak. And I got a couple pictures with him, so that was fun. But I really enjoyed speaking with Ed and Peter. They had really insightful perspectives. And if you aspire to be a better leader, then you don't want to miss this interview. But I felt like I got to know them a little bit too, and that was fun because, they were talking about what they like to do in their free time, and I just really enjoyed it.
It was a great interview, Tracy.
I'd like to welcome our guests today for today's special, Ed and Peter Schein, the co-authors of a new book, Humble Leadership, The Power of Relationships, Openness, and Trust, which is the fourth book in the Humble Leadership series, following the books Humble Consulting, Humble Inquiry, and Helping. So let me tell you a little bit about Ed before we get started, and Peter. So Ed is Professor Emeritus from the MIT Sloan School of Management, where he taught from the 1960s to the early 2000s. He's published about 200 books and papers in many languages around the world, covering topics such as organizational development, culture, careers, and leadership. Ed was educated at the University of Chicago, Stanford, and Harvard, where he did his PhD at the School of Social Relations. Peter is co-founder and COO of the Organizational Culture and Leadership Institute, partnered with Ed to promote the organizational culture studies and leadership theory. Peter has spent over 25 years in management in Silicon Valley, working at big companies like Apple, SGI, and Sun Microsystems, as well as numerous internet infrastructure startups. Peter is also the co-author of the upcoming third edition of the Corporate Culture Survival Guide, which I have, and a contributing author of the fifth edition of Organizational Culture and Leadership. Peter was educated at Stanford as well, and Northwestern Kellogg, where he did his MBA. Welcome to the Just in Time Cafe, Ed and Peter.
Glad to be here.
Hello.
I hope you're both enjoying your coffee at the moment.
Yep.
Yes, indeed.
So I really would like to talk about your new book. I think it's going to be a big hit with our audience in the process improvement world. You mention in the book that it's for managers and leaders looking to create change in their organizations, but it's not just for that audience. Can you share a little bit more about who else would benefit from reading this book?
Well, I'll start knowing that many in your audience are in the process improvement, organization improvement world. Where I see humble leadership applying almost immediately is in how we actually do our improvement work in an organization relationally. Instead of thinking of the perfect design and imposing it, maybe having talked to some of the employees and sort of getting an idea of what would be a better design, we then expect that somehow magically people will just adopt that design because we as experts have designed it. And the biggest lesson I've learned from Humble Inquiry and Humble Leadership is that until we build a relationship with those people who are going to have to implement the improvement, and if that doesn't become a personalized relationship, I don't think we can count on them to cheer our beautiful improvement design just because we thought it was great. To me, it's right there at that structure where relationships matter.
So really anyone that is looking to build a relationship and better groups could benefit from reading this book, is what I hear you say.
Absolutely. The ideal organization of the future at all levels, the improved organization, is going to be one where people are not treated in their roles, but are treated as total human beings.
We take the perspective in this book that leadership is a verb, not a role. So it's not about what you're entitled as a leader, but what your impetus, what that you provide to your organization. Leadership in our definition is wanting to do something new and better and building the relationships in order to do that. It does not require that you be a VP. It does not require that you have an organization of 10,000 people. It requires that you have an impetus to do something new and better and build the relationships to get it done.
Very nice. So, so you talk about this in your book, which I think is wonderful. There's a lot of leadership books out there. Why do we need another book on leadership, and how is Humble Leadership different? And the reason why I ask is I know you talk about this in your book.
Well, we saw several reasons, and we'll probably both comment. The reason I saw most important is that the kind of work that leadership has to do in the future is, as I put it, leadership is becoming a group sport. It's involved in interdependent employees having to learn how to collaborate with each other. It involves constant perpetual change, which requires a whole new approach to how we design things for, perpetual change. So the tasks that organizations face are one of the major reasons. And another one that I want Peter to comment on is what he would describe as there's something new in the air.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. We sort of felt like, Ed's been writing books for a long time, and it was his chance and our chance together to write a book that sort of is nudging people to modernize their thinking about leadership. And implicit in that is one thing where we, could be accused of ranting and raving a little bit in this book, which we think is okay, but that we're trying to challenge the myth of the sort of the heroic leader, the cult of the hero leading an organization, and climbing to the top by, sort of rigid transactionalism rather than getting groups and teams to perform better. The other thing we really like to challenge, which we think, grew out of the post-Taylorist kind of modern machine model for organizations that we think is sort of a 20th century concept. In other words, is not going to work in the future. But the idea of challenging the myth that professional distance is a good thing. So a lot of this book is focused on getting our readers and the people we work with to think about why professional distance might have been assumed as the way you should behave at work, when in fact you might actually be able to get much more done if you start to build what we call level 2 personal relationships at work.
Enter there and give an example that ties it to the improvement work.
Yes.
One of the cases in the book that impressed us most was this commander of the submarine who knew that he had to improve both how that submarine worked and the morale of the people. And here he is, the top dog with all the knowledge. So what does he do? He sits down with his chief petty officers, who he realizes are sort of the ones who really make the place run, and says, are you guys satisfied with how this submarine is running? Their jaws fell. They had never been asked. And they didn't really believe that he had anything other than a pocket agenda. But when he stuck to the question, they began to open up. They began to feel they were being taken seriously. And they immediately came up with some of the most important improvement ideas that he, as an expert, would not have been able to figure out. So this idea of empowering the employee in the improvement space becomes a very central idea.
So I have a question I'm dying to ask, and I just wanted your opinion on this. Why is it that so many people misinterpret leadership as the divine right to tell other people what to do? Because even children, when you ask them, when you're in charge or when you're a leader, what does that mean? They say, well, I get to tell everybody what to do. Why is that the overarching interpretation of leadership?
Yeah, we think that's embedded in Western capitalist U.S. culture of rugged individualism, competition, and status through rank and wealth.
Mm-hmm.
The way people define getting ahead is in terms of hierarchy and achieving that personally. So in my classes, when I would ask Sloan Fellows at MIT, what did it mean to you when you first became promoted into a managerial job? They almost universally said, now I can tell others what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And interpreted that as they had now gained status, and status meant power, and power meant telling others. They were thinking in terms of climbing the ladder rather than in terms of getting the job done better.
I see. And you particularly said Western United States. Do you find that's not the case in other parts of the world?
Well, I can't give you, the same degree of personal knowledge, but the observations of what happens in countries that are more communitarian,
Mm-hmm.
where get brought up to be loyal to the group above all else. I suspect they have a way of saying that leadership is above all else is the welfare of the group rather than your own personal position.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, how they define individuality as what the group grants you, whereas we define individuality as what you claw your way into.
I wanted to add too that our excitement about the sort of dovetailing with some of what we talk about in humble leadership and lean or the Toyota production system or agile software development that I'm more familiar with actually is that there is this idea that you have to challenge that assumption of a sort of a hierarchical downward waterfall of handoffs. Right? That's not really how good products get planned, how good decisions get made. That may have been in the 1950s when we were trying to make, a simple assembly line work better. But the world is getting too complex for that kind of sort of top-down waterfall thinking. And so how you plan products, how you make trade-offs, how you, design features requires a different, much more sort of 360-degree attitude about progress.
And the creation of a climate in which people who know stuff will tell a leader what they know rather than being scared or feeling unsafe because they might be shot down as the messenger. There's a lot in the traditional culture that makes people feel unsafe, and we have to reduce that psychological distance to make it possible for people to speak up.
We have a lot of examples in the book that are drawn from sort of modern thinking in the U.S. military. And, it's interesting because I think they'd be the first to say that there are a lot of situations where command and control is the last thing you should do.
So, Peter, I'd like to get back to something you had mentioned earlier. You had mentioned that leaders should be striving to build level 2 relationships, and you talk about these different levels in the book, levels 1 through 4. Can you tell us, give us a brief explanation of what these levels are?
Sure. I'll go quickly. So we talk about the first level, the lowest level being level -1. Because and rather than level 0, because -1, it's still a relationship, but it's a relationship of dominance or sort of exploitation. So that kind of relationship that a prisoner might have with a guard, or a manager would have of a sweatshop. Level 1 is the relationship that we're probably most familiar with in sort of our typical day-to-day transactional business life, unfortunately, that where we have, there's a modicum of trust that we're going to transact an exchange or a decision, but it is based on the speed of transaction and the intent of maintaining professional distance. And level 2 is the counter to that, which says that in order for information to flow, for openness and trust to develop, you need to build a personal, or what we're calling in the book, personized relationship, where it's one whole person interacting with another whole person, taking into all accounts of who that person is and what's going on in their life, again, to the extent that it's appropriate in a professional context. The third level is, in one word, is intimacy. And generally, this isn't something that we accept or condone in the workplace. However, we do think there's a number of places where if you think about intimacy as, in a phrase, the ability to sort of answer your partners, to answer each other's questions. In other words, knowing each other so well, trusting each other so well that you have that level of connection. We do see places like on some pro sports teams where they seem to have a level of connectedness that's beyond a kind of a normal human personal connection. Or in places where, like in the military and SEAL teams or special forces, where they train together so rigorously and get to know each other at such a deep level that they have a deeper level of empathy than you might normally see in a workplace environment. So those are the levels. We will say that in our conversations about this, we hear a lot of people talking about, well, is there a level 2.5? Because the idea that, I don't have an intimate relationship, but I am really close with some of the people that I work with. And sometimes I feel like it's more than what you're describing as a level 2 relationship. We love it when we get that question because it says to us that people are really starting to understand what we're talking about.
And you mentioned in the book that how you accomplish getting to level 1, moving from level 1 to level 2, one of the ways is through personalization. So tell us, and that's just more than being nice to somebody. So can you tell us a little bit about what that is and why it's critical to developing better relationships?
Yeah, I think that's a key question. And when you said not just being nice to someone, I would say niceness has absolutely nothing to do with it. It's getting to know the other person. And how do we know how to do this? We do it when we're building a friendship. When on a date, we're trying to get the other person to reveal more about him or herself. When we open ourselves up, we are well trained in our social life how to be more personal. But for some peculiar reason, we have said that that's not appropriate at work. And rather than having to learn a whole new set of interpersonal skills, my view is you just transfer some of the skills of getting to know the other person around the work issues, but using your social skills that you would use in your family or in other places to do that at work. Simple things like you're in the boss's office and you see a picture of his family on the desk, wander over and say, "Is that your family?" That immediately forces personalization. And the boss can reject it, which is important for you to learn, but the boss might really love that you've asked about it and talk about his family, and right off the bat, you're in a different relationship. So it's not so mysterious. It's just that it doesn't occur to us to do it.
We've sort of showed up at work with this myth of professional distance. We just don't think professional distance is helpful.
Right. And, I would say that there's some leaders out there, if I told them that they needed to develop a better relationship, leadership's about a relationship, and how do you do that with personalization, they would probably look at me like I was nuts, right? Because, they've always kept distance and felt that was important. What advice would you have for someone that is struggling with creating personalization with their direct reports? What would be some examples of things they could do besides asking about their family and those kinds of things? Is there any other advice you would have for people that struggle with this?
Well, I think they have to ask themselves, what does it cost me not to have a more trusting relationship with my subordinates? What am I missing? What are they withholding from me in the way of information or even engagement? I think there has to be some recognition on the part of the level one leader that I'm not getting the most out of my job and my people. There has to be some motivation for that person to ask himself, what am I doing wrong? And slowly discover that what they're doing wrong is keeping that distance. But it's an internal discovery process. I don't think you can ask people just to transform themselves. I think they have to start with, am I getting the most out of my relationship, or are people lying to me or not really telling me the most of what they know? They have to find some kind of a fulcrum around which to rethink.
I just wanted to add, it's one thing for us as leaders to think about, I need to be able to get the answer to the questions that I ask of my people. We're trying to say, no, you really need to get the answers to the questions you don't ask of your people. It's a matter of creating an openness that they're going to tell you stuff that you didn't know and you wouldn't have known otherwise. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that, we think, comes from going in there and starting to reveal a little bit more of yourself and maybe a little bit more of what's going on at work with you than you might have previously been comfortable doing.
Yes.
Because, the point being, things are changing so fast. What are the odds that you're going to tell too much? I just think the odds that you're going to tell somebody too much are kind of going down. The bigger thing is, can you create a situation where you will be able to rapidly share information that allow you to move faster? And so that idea of you want answers to the questions you don't ask is
very,
important.
very, that's excellent insight. Thank you for that. Well, I can't believe we're almost out of time and I'm almost out of coffee. So I'm going to practice something that you're telling other people to do. I'm going to try some personalization. And my question for you now is, where are you guys spending your time? What are you doing? What's interesting to you these days? I mean, you've been in this space for a very long time. And so what is really interesting to you these days?
Well, I'll start quickly because it's easy. When I retired and came out to California to be near my son and in a very nice retirement home, I figured out that what I really, really like to do, since I'm now 90 and can't do a lot of sports stuff, is I like to write. So I'm very happily sitting in a small apartment doing memoirs, writing for the local house newspaper, and writing books with Peter. That is my hobby these days.
That's wonderful.
And I'm also cherishing the opportunity to spend this time with Ed, who's 90. We're acting like we're a lot younger, and we've got a new book coming up in the new edition of the Corporate Culture Survival Guide. And, there's a long list of things that we continue to want to be doing.
And we're big sports fans. Go Red Sox. Go Stanford. So we
That's wonderful.
Also, go Patriots.
Well, and are you are obviously in the Bay Area, San Jose area then?
Ed lives in Palo Alto and I live in Menlo Park. So Ed is across the street from the Stanford campus, essentially, and I'm another mile away. So we're right in the craziness of Silly Valley here and loving it. Yeah.
Yes, it is a wonderful place. I used to live up in the San Francisco Bay Area for a time, in San Mateo and in Burlingame. Yeah, it's wonderful up there. So, so if anyone wants to get a hold of you in terms of, I don't know, attending a seminar or a course or seeing you guys speak, how would they find you?
Well, there's a couple places. One, we do have a site called humbleleadership.com that is all about the book. And there is a place there for press inquiries, but the other probably better place to get in touch with us directly is through our website, ocli.org. And then there's a contact page in there. That is mostly sort of has more about sort of content and some of the things that we're working on, and less about sort of upcoming events or things like that. But any inquiries we would welcome through that site.
Wonderful. Well, it was really wonderful talking to you both. Thanks for joining me today at the Just in Time Cafe. I look forward to reading more memoirs and more books from the both of you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Fun to talk.
Definitely check out Tracy's post about the AME, that's Association of Manufacturing Excellence Conference. I'm so sorry I missed that, but the blog is fabulous. It could be a substitute. It's full of great nuggets from the keynote speakers. Also, December's Wonder Woman of Quality is Sally Toyster. She's a Lean Six Sigma powerhouse at Marriott. And I love her Twitter handle, which is Gembagal. Do not miss her post. And mark your calendars for Thursday, December 20th for Tracy's next webinar on the 4 components of a lean culture.
In our next episode, Elizabeth interviews Kamaljit Jackson. She's done wonderful work bringing process improvement into the Wisconsin school system.
We just had a great time at the Just in Time Cafe, and we hope you did too.
Come back for more in 2 weeks.